one of the biggest innovations that COVID has caused is remote working for the masses. The last decade, people have been working remotely and ironing out the kinks.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have really good software and internet stability, et cetera, to make it easy and to make it really work well and to make video conferencing practical.
Mm-hmm.
And so all things entrepreneurial and remote have seen a surge in attention.
Yeah, and also people being stuck at home. Is that making too much noise, by the way? I was going to try to take some notes.
You're fine.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing, right? If you're not having to commute and you're not sick of seeing people all the time, you got to get out and you have to find things to do outside of work, especially to socialize.
Yeah. I also think I think that up until this point, a lot of people were never faced with the consequence of government as much as they have been, and the consequence of things out of their control. And so now I feel like a lot of people have had to have that hard look in the mirror, and there's going to be a renaissance of the individuals that had the revelation, and to basically after this, there's going to be a lot of startups, a lot of ideas, a lot of compassion, a lot of it's going to run the gamut of creativity to if we are able to get to that next step. That's why I think like this election is interestingly such a like a harbinger of a change potentially, or not even a change, or like a statement to say, we've looked at potentially an America that looks really fucked up and scary, but we want to fix it, whatever that means.
And no one agrees on what that means.
They don't.
They really don't.
But I think
I didn't realize that until the last couple of years.
No, they don't. But what's interesting about that is if we have a government at least, and this is why it's fucked up, if we have a government that at least runs in a status quo way, it facilitates, and let's say it makes good decisions about us, like finally getting through COVID, that like level of, I call it like complacency government, where you're like, oh, it's out there doing its thing. Like you don't think about it because your liberty, your ability to work hasn't been taken away. I think now that if that happens again, like I think I think Biden is going to be that status quo. I think
it might end up being Byron because Biden might not make it.
Yeah, that's true. But I just think that so there is an opportunity for us to kind of have a major renaissance and working from home, finding out what's important, being healthier. Hopefully, will kind of force people into a state of necessity that creates change in the positive direction. But then there's people who just don't have that. There's people who can't work right now, period. So I'm saying that, and you and I are saying that with the ability to generate some income while we're at home. There are people who aren't. So what innovation, what opportunities, what kind of like things are going to come out of that? Hopefully there are going to be some, and they're going to be pretty powerful, I think. Others, I don't know. I think some people don't have the benefit of taking advantage of this time to do some growth. So that's a problem too.
About a decade ago, I was sitting at a friend's in Florida watching football. And on his coffee table to the left of me was a book by Tim Ferriss titled 4 Hour Workweek.
Mm-hmm.
And I chuckled at the title and smirked at him. I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, it's not really about a 4 hour work week." And I'm like, "So what's it about?" It's about a 4 hour work week, but it's not really about that. You just got to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of read it. And I didn't really get it. And I moved on with my life. And at the time I was a chiropractor, and there's no way I could ever work 4 hours. And it just didn't make sense. And I didn't have the patience because I was I didn't have the patience to try and draw the nuggets out and apply them to my own life. I didn't have the patience to do that with much at the time.
How often were you working? Like, I mean, how many hours a week were you working at that point?
All of them.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to make that medical school money back, bro.
So one of the things that I would do that wasn't work is I would try to go to bars and flirt. And it was really hard to turn off the nerd. Well, I am a nerd, I suppose, but it was really hard to turn off the "you should let me check your spine" thing and just talk normally to people. And a lot
there's
of
pros and cons to that. I mean, it probably
friends I went out
lines.
with were chiropractic students quite often. So I was just always, because if I wasn't seeing someone to adjust, then I needed to be out there finding someone to adjust. And one of the best ways I found different ways that were effective. The least effective seemed to be like paid newspaper or radio ads. And I had good luck, like volunteering for nonprofits or community events, or I coached Little League, and just things that I kind of had an interest in doing.
But see, that's what makes you you, though. You know what I'm saying? Like that's probably why you also had the revelation that you potentially had. You know, because you were doing it. You were doing it for the good, for the common good, and it would generate your income. But then also you see the dark side of that and what that entails of like the bullshit. You know, and I don't say chiropractic has really helped me out, and I am by no means a medical expert. You know, it takes a lot of training. There's a difference between the individual that cares and the one that's just in it to make money and fake promises. And I've had to learn that through conversations with you and also experiencing it myself, you know. And I think a lot of people, that's what they have good experiences, they have people who care. They're like, I swear by chiropractic. If they have shitty experiences, then they say, oh, that person was a complete kook. But there's like real help that can be given, but it's not by the entire science. Like it's not the whole what is it, like Scientology aspect of it. That's a good thing, you know?
Well said. There's a lot of good in chiropractic, and there are a lot of good chiropractors.
Yeah. So anyway, I interrupted you, but you were saying like I think that that's what differentiates.
So if I wasn't directly working, like doing notes or seeing a patient or billing insurance, I was trying to do something like that outside of my house that would put me in connection with people who needed chiropractic services and could afford chiropractic services. So I was also in the Rotary, which was a bunch of business owners. So they generally, at least the older members, quite often had done well, so they could afford to come see me, or they might supply insurance to a bunch of employees. So in the meantime, we would clean up like parts of this intercoastal waterway in town, and we would build playgrounds for kids, and we would sponsor events.
I don't mean to be shaking my head at you. You're just such a good dude. Like I've never done any of that.
But so at the same time, it was marketing. Like I also would have liked to had a few more relaxed relationships with friends and maybe with myself, but I felt a lot of pressure to pay off those loans, like you said. So I would just work all the time.
But also, how long ago did you decide to quit? Like
2000. Well, so probably 2013 or 2014, I came across that book, The 4-Hour Workweek, a second time.
Yeah.
And I was ready to actually hear what it was saying. And I started concocting how to live life generating an income remotely so that I could go live somewhere for the quality of life or experience and not for the job. And it wasn't until 2015 that I think I saw my last patient, maybe 16, maybe 15.
It's interesting to look back on that time and to see the transformation based on a decision. You know, you altered your trajectory considerably, considering the emotional and the financial and physical cost of the schooling and the profession. And you had committed to something that a lot of people just, you know, dentists don't reinvent themselves. You know, like they do some, sure, but it's got to be pretty awesome to kind of look back on that and say, I made this decision, and now it's like there's strange things happening in my life that are proving that it probably it might be the right it might have been the right choice despite some of the pitfalls or whatever. Like I think that that's pretty neat to look back on that. It's a weird thing
When
to think
I
about.
when I first made the choice, I had a lot of success, even in the planning. Like when I said to myself, I'm a chiropractor. That's what I'm used to doing, studying studying different aspects of health and then applying them within the scope of that profession. Chiropractic is what I know how to do, and I really haven't learned how to do much else. The next option kind of appeared for me right away. And then as I took steps to make that a side small business, I was able to find customers and I was able to increase revenue month to month.
And that ties into
And
your question about, you know, remote learning. Not remote learning, remote work, remote learning. You
yes,
know,
and
yeah.
it wasn't as common. I had plenty of examples to learn from,
Hmm.
but there were no standards. And at this point in the game of careers in 2020, there are kind of standards for how to go about remote work.
Yeah.
Then it was more of a pitch and to see if it worked.
Right.
And that worked really well. And then I kind of lost everything
Mm.
once I thought I knew what I was doing. And I had to, and that was when I really had to figure things out. And I think that a lot of people are dealing with similar experiences right now
Hmm.
in that they're finding themselves
Yep.
working remotely. All of a sudden, as they're working remotely, they're having thoughts that they have never had in their professional lives because they're not having the same concerns. They're spending more time at home.
Why the fuck would I commute an hour to my job? Why would
And
I not
and
spend
then
time with my kids?
sometimes,
You know?
do I really want to live here if
Right.
I'm not having to do this commute? Is this
Yep.
why I was actually here? And naturally they come to, I would probably like to start a side hustle because I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this job that I thought was going to be really fun in college, and then I forgot about it and I never tried that. And then the fear sets in of how do I implement this and am I worthy of making it happen?
Yeah.
And what people usually hear are the success stories. And
Mhm.
once you get on the other side of some success and really start meeting successful people, you come to realize that most of the people who have been able to implement their own business idea and become independent, they did it out of a crisis. They did it
Yep.
out of their life really changing for the worse. And it didn't feel like the right time to do what they were doing. It was do or die all of a sudden out of necessity.
Mhm.
And that should make the person considering taking a chance feel a lot better as long as they've done, a mature job of business planning.
Yeah.
That you too can figure this out. And in fact, if things start going wrong, you planned for that, and maybe that'll bring out the best in you.
Yeah. I think you're right, and it's it's interesting that you're bringing all this up because I've been doing side hustles now for a few years, and I feel like I'm at the precipice of making that. I've been at the precipice a few times of making that decision of being like, okay, if I'm going to continue to do this because A, I've made some money, let's say with like the jujitsu clothing or the artwork, right? Or B, I know I'm really good and there's nothing like me on the market, like with Dungeons and Dragons. Now it's very weird to think about that, but like we've had a podcast, I've done murals, clothing design, all this stuff. I got my real estate license, but I mean, I've had a 9 to 5 job.
Not to mention you've changed your day job. You've had one
Right.
really accomplished career, and you do something completely different now. You do the UX.
Right. The reason why, and I'm not talking about this like it's a good thing. So this is where like I'm at. It's great that I'm doing this stuff. It's cool. Like it sounds neat. Let's say it sounds like I'm doing a lot, but I haven't had the balls to like kick one of them up a notch. Am I like when your hobby starts becoming something that you like start thinking about like, oh shit, I could do this more often, or how can I like at what level of commitment can I give this in order to generate some income? I think for me that's like the tightrope act. If you go all in on one thing, good for you. I think for me it's like, can I go in a little bit on all of these that they start generating small buckets of money? That was my initial thought. And then I'd be like, then I don't really have to do it. It's not my normal 9 to 5. As I think about it more, I'm like, I could do this more, but that comes at a sacrifice. And so I think a lot of people are probably, like you said, if they're realizing that, hey, I had this hobby that, and I'm stuck 6 months in the house because of COVID, like I'd love to make knives, or something crazy. By the end of it, if you're committed, you could potentially have an online business, even if you make
Right.
one sale.
Because
Even if you make one sale,
it's not that crazy with the
no.
resources these days.
So it's weird to kind of like think about that and think that I haven't taken the plunge. There's the opportunity. I weigh it between like what I do for actual work, which I'm lucky I have a job. So maybe if someone didn't, there could be that impetus to go into that direction. Um, I don't know. It's fascinating to think about, especially now because we're stuck, kind of. We're stuck in this holding pattern, and it's manifesting itself in people being very lax about the situation because we want it over.
Tell me the story of Spiro sketches.
I'm sitting at the counter of my family's restaurant, and no one's in the place. And I have a Samsung Galaxy Note 4.
What does the restaurant look like? Paint the scene.
The restaurant is a traditional American diner, but a little more old school.
In downtown Chicago, surrounded by.
It's in a very residential area called Old Town. Started by my grandfather. So, you have like your quintessential diner counter, which is in like a U shape. Then we have some, booths against the wall, some tables in front, and this huge, like floor to ceiling glass facade that says in like gold, old school saloon kind of letters, Nookie's Restaurants at the top. I'm sitting in there and I'm contemplating. Must have been I think it was like right when I turned 30. I had like a crisis. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I turned 30. Instead of celebrating it, I went to a friend's wedding and I didn't want to celebrate it. It was much better to be around them. So all these things are going through my mind just to kind of set the psychological tone. And I take this thing out and I start drawing. And then I always used to doodle. I always used to do art. I would make cards for people for fun, nothing crazy. But that like facilitation of that stylus in the software, and it got better. It got me thinking, like I started drawing stuff. And then one day a coworker of mine was hosting a show. They used to do this comedy show. It was like an outdoor comedy during like the full moon. They were doing like witchy comedy shit. It was cool. So she asked me to make a poster. And so with this like tiny screen, I start sketching out this poster. And I had done some of my other stuff. She's like, why don't you sell some of your shit at the place? So I took the single image I drew. I have right here. I'll show it to you. Is that relevant? Can we? All right.
All right.
Yeah, and I drew something, and it became like I put it in Illustrator, and it became this. This was like the first like thing I ever did.
That's the one.
That's the one. So once I sold it,
can you hold it? Can you hold it up one more time, just still for a second, so the camera can maybe catch it?
Yeah, the reflection is not great.
I know.
I can. I'll send it to you if you want to like post it. You know, so some like crazy psychedelic kind of stuff. I started doing all sorts of reflections and inversions of like tiny little creatures, and I sold a bunch of stuff. And then I was like, "Whoa, I should do an art show." So I don't remember how, but I said, "Okay, I want to do an art show." I think my aunt at the time, or my godmother at the time, had a friend who was doing a Christmas show. Anyway, long story short, I see it there. I see that it sells. I'm like, it would look dope if I could make some jujitsu rash guards. That takes me into one direction. Instagram starts building up. I just do fun stuff. I post fun stuff. I start making more things. I've got a ton more artwork that I just haven't put up because I took a break from social media. Um, and slowly I've just been like either selling rash guards, selling hoodies, mugs, prints, getting what's it called? Getting people to like want to commission me to do stuff.
And how does like the are you seeking out these different products that want to incorporate your work, or does it just happen?
Yes and no. Like my whole mentality about this thing is that like I enjoy doing it. Closed mouths don't get fed. Closed mouths don't get fed. So ask. I had a deal. It's not even a deal. Like this is the thing. Like this is just me reaching out to people and saying I'm going to do it to see what the outcome is going to be. When it starts coming to money and negotiating money, I'm not going to ask for thousands of dollars. I'll take $50, $75, whatever it is, to kind of see, hey, is it worth it? If I give somebody a deal the first time, and it's not even a deal, it's like, what is my art worth in the beginning? You have to do shit for free, or you have to start doing it like for very cheap, because then that's great marketing for you. You do your first couple of jobs. But what I didn't do is like I didn't undersell myself. I was like, okay, everything here, it cost me $2 to print. I'm going to charge $30 a print. Okay, you make money off of that. So you're making money off of some of your initial investments. People are like, hey, I want you to do a commission. I say, okay, base. If I think about it, it'll be X amount of dollars an hour. I said 25 the first time. Then I went up to like 55. Sometimes I'll make shit for people. Like there's this kid who's really good at jujitsu. He's like an 11-year-old kid. And he followed me when I was first putting my rash guards on there. I have a relationship with him and his dad now. I sponsored him basically. I made shorts.
Good marketing, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. But the cool thing about it wasn't about that. It was that like I never made shorts before. So because I had made rash guards with this guy, and because I was just like, he really liked my rash guards, he connected me with his son. He's teaching his son, who's now 15 years old, to do the exact same business model he has. So he's got his own company called Spyridon. And by the way, shout out to Cruise Combat if anyone's ever going to hear this. They're the guys who did it. But like even through that, I get to work with his son. Get to work with a 13-year-old kid that has his own apparel company. Like how cool is that? We would have after school talks, talk about designs. I would reach out to them. I sent his son a skateboard. Like we kind of established a relationship. Through there, a bunch of the guys at the gym supported it. But see, this is the thing. Like the what's the word I was looking for? The impetus was there. It was moving in the right direction. And then I kind of got hurt and I had other priorities, And so I'm trying to revive it now again by doing murals, by like I went into hibernation to think about art a little bit more. Now I feel like I'm coming out of it, So is this the time that I'm going to like push it to be a legitimate? I've been toying around with the idea of making a legitimate drop ship jujitsu apparel company, or just whatever company making weird shit, whatever I want, put it on the site, sell it. Like that's my next step. I think it's going to be kind of like a supreme model where I do only certain prints, never get reprinted.
Do you think that, because I'm like not, well, I'm not an artist in the classical way, and a lot of people are. Do you think that people who pursue art should try to do it as a side hustle versus trying to just do that, and as up until the point where they're making it or where they're comfortable.
I mean, so that's hard for me to say, right? My job, my full-time job is relatively creative. It's except I think for me, what happened is like I had to rationalize reality. Like, and I'm no offense to anybody who thinks that they want to be or is a career artist. Okay, look what's going on right now. Where are your gallery showings going to be? No one's going to be there. Like what? So if the internet, specifically Instagram, is a great platform, especially now that they're going to be moving into like a new frontier of in-app purchases, right? But see, I'm interested by business too. So I knew that I needed a job that paid the bills so that I could support what I was doing if I wanted to, or at least like I have other like personal goals in my life, financial goals. So some people aren't about that. Like for me, the art to me is primary and secondary. Primary, I get to like experiment and do my art, but secondary in the sense that like sometimes I feel like selling my art is bullshit because I drew this when I was smoking an edible and it looked cool. I put it on Instagram and immediately someone was like, yo, dude, how much for that? So it's interesting that like, is it that you should just treat it as an experiment and then it becomes something? Or should you say, this is my life's passion and I want to pursue it? Because I think the life's passion route is going to lead to a lot of disappointment for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a slippery slope.
And it's going to be a slippery slope unless you, I think if you go into art and you're not going into it for the business of art, cool, but everybody was selling their paintings back in the day. You go and you see a Monet, you don't think he made a lot, like, he had art dealers. He was going to parties. Like it was
Creating increasing value in that work is a
right.
business, and there's
Yep.
marketing and other aspects outside of just the artist making the work involved
I think the
as
problem is
well.
people think that it loses its purity if you do that, but it doesn't. What it does is it secures your financial future, which facilitates you doing it more.
I want to make a living spreading uh, basically scientific. I basically want to be Bill Nye, but
But a real scientist.
I want to make a living spreading like educational information in essentially a creative way, and I enjoy doing comedy, which can only be seen as wanting to be somewhat creative, and I guess somewhat narcissistic, right? Um,
It's an art
but
form.
but it is.
Yeah, it is.
But I feel like the only way I can look at expressing myself in those ways is from a business model. Like if it doesn't pay, there's zero reason for me to even spend time in my life doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And that's what's interesting, I think, also about this time, because if you think about like anybody you listen to in these podcasts, right? Or like people like comedians, like the stand-up comedian story. Everybody was going to LA, they're going to New York, they're working shit jobs. And I feel like it was because they could afford to at the time, especially with some like the people who are huge now were coming up, or like they were able, like if you look at what's his name, who has the show where they rate stand-up comedians, the skinny guy, whatever.
Hinchcliffe?
Yeah, Hinchcliffe. He was a writer first, like he had financial stuff going on. So I think it's like now, especially where people aren't able to travel across the country to like work as a server, especially the fucking server. I grew up in the service industry. This is not a knock to anybody who works there. I think you can make a crazy living and you can do a lot in the service industry. But a lot of those people were people who were really trying to make it as actors, as comedians, as artists, as musicians. There's a lot of people who are using that as their main source of income. So I don't mean to like denigrate the idea that like it's that easy You start like working a normal job and then doing your passion, and if you work hard enough, it's going to happen. But like you're talking about an entire, it's very interesting. Like there's going to be like a brain drain in some creativity, I think, because the entire service industry, either that or the opposite, the entire service industry was like laid low by this thing. So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent. Point being that,
I feel like this experience for the country has created more low paying jobs and not more jobs that replaced ones that allowed you to support yourself.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think a lot of those existed like within the food service industry.
yeah, I agree. In the food service industry for sure. And yeah, I mean, like for sure, dude. You're talking about what I think it was like 7 million jobs, something like that, maybe more. I mean, they're talking about 60% of all restaurants closing permanently. You know, 1 in 4 restaurants are going to make it in Illinois. They were saying potentially. I don't know. It's
That's
crazy.
dark, man. I mean, we can we can have high expectations of our people, but we also need to couple that with realistic expectations.
We do, and we also need to
It's a lot
realize
to
that
come back from.
yeah, it is a lot to come back from. It really is. Like I know that a lot of them have gotten reabsorbed as the economies are opening back up. I think they said that up to I think they're from this time last year they're shy 1 point something million of where they were last year, which is still a lot of fucking jobs. But the service industry has reabsorbed a lot of people, which I'm hoping continues to happen. The question, of course, is going to be what happens if they close everything down again? Because give us an inch, we're going to take a fucking mile. This is America, baby. You know, this is what we do. We're not thinking about the common good of the nation.
And we do it for politics. We do it
Yeah,
for votes.
we're not fucking New Zealand. And yeah, I know everybody's gonna say, well, New Zealand is a small fucking country. And I'll tell you what, I fucking lived there. Okay, I lived in New Zealand. All right, I bring it up only because there's something that happens in smaller countries, rightfully so. Greece being another one, that there is a social and national identity that is tied to your country, and you do it for the common good of the country. New Zealand, way more than even Greece, I would say, because Greece, there's a lot of people who are corrupt and do things for their own gain. That being said,
Are you saying they infight?
they infight a lot in Greece. I mean, they do. I think they infight a lot in New Zealand, but like they were faced by a crisis that was a disease, and they were like, "We got to do this for our future." America is like a gilded steam engine that has like a plow in the front of it, and it's just gonna fucking go until it runs out of coal and gas. And I feel like right now the engine is like really shaken because you know the people shoveling the coal are having a rough time. And I think I wish we would work a little bit better, but I also understand like why America is the way that it is. It's not a good thing, but
It is what it is,
it is what it
and
is. It's
there
not a bad thing either.
have never really been a perfect people.
No. But you know, you think about like I have a picture of my grandfather, Second World War, right? You know, I think my dad came to this country. I think about like the America that uh, you know they imagined when they came here. I have stories. You know, my dad came in '67. My grandfather, all his brothers fought in the Second World War. My mom's husband. You know, all these people kind of came together
Hit the ground running.
to hit the ground running to seize the opportunity. And I know it's the baby boomer generation and the greatest generation and all this stuff. And now we're dealing with that not amnesia, but that memory of this like idyllic America, which wasn't idyllic for a lot of people. So, you know, and I don't know if that's just because I'm lucky because the narrative of my family and the Greek community in general tends to be one of prosperity, tends to be, you know, I mean, realistically, a lot of them end up doing really well for themselves. Um, but it doesn't feel like it did like when I was growing up, you know, where you think about that as in a prideful way. I feel pride for my family coming here, but the pride of the country, like the way that people talked about it, is a little different. And I don't really have a value judgment on that. I personally miss the feeling of just getting along, but maybe it wasn't real. I don't know.
It feels like as a people, a few decades ago, we were overall more conservative on the outside, but we were almost more tolerant of people being different. And now I feel like we just have intolerance across the board, which just creates a lot of inconsistencies. Like a lot of conservatism, I feel like has gone so has responded so hard to certain liberal sentiment that it wants to now control people's lives and isn't actually conservative.
Well,
It's just a set of voting habits.
mm-hmm.
And I think that really starts skewing where the line is between being a conservative, reserved, mind your own business person
Mm-hmm.
and someone who really wants to look after the welfare of the entire public,
Mm-hmm.
but also knows that in order to do that, they have to work with this other side that is truly conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they just come up to them all crazy,
Right,
they're not going to get any response. They're just going to, but now there's just like, it's just like two cats like battling.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just flinging their own hypocrisy at each other.
They are. I think what has happened, and I touched on it with the sentiment I had about like the pride in America from like the son of like first generation standpoint. I think. Well, it's storming out there. Sorry about that. I think.
You have a storm?
Yeah, sounds like it. I think there's
Sweet.
like nostalgia. The nostalgia that I think some people feel about an America that was like sold to them on TV and in movies, like this exceptionalism, when the reality was what country songs like kind of talk about, and in the sense of like hard work, what like rock and roll songs talk about. Like I I feel like we have this almost Hollywood memory of what it used to be like, um, and and we're holding on to that in our own definition. Some people, like I think some people on the right, and then people on the left really want change in the right direction, but I don't think they know how to articulate it sometimes. Um, some do, and I think they have the right to do that. But I don't know how they articulate it either. I mean, I'm on the left. I'm more
My
left leaning, so.
my logic, and know me really well, so you might
Hmm.
describe me differently than I describe myself. But I
Hmm.
think of myself as a pretty conservative person who often has personal ideals that are pretty liberal. Like
Hmm.
I don't really align with, like I think that we should have much different drug policies. I think that we should stay out. I think anybody should be able to get married that wants to. Between two people, I don't think guys should be marrying dogs or trees, not for tax benefits, but I
Hmm.
think that should be okay. Um, uh, yeah, I just think we should stay out of people's bedrooms. And
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's
otherwise,
funny.
I like low taxes, and
Mhm.
I support guns existing. And
What's really interesting about especially the gun issue? I was actually talking to somebody about this today, a coworker. People who are, and she would, self-identify as being very liberal. And her partner both discussed the fact that they were like, should we get a gun license? It's very interesting to me. Like that one is such a hot button issue.
I think
Um,
people should have control over their own bodies. I'm sorry.
yeah, 100%, 100%. I think it kind of all.
I just didn't mean to leave that out because that's pretty important too.
No, it is, and I think it's one of the most important things because I think it goes hand in hand with the drug thing. Like if you want to justify legalizing certain drugs or legalizing all drugs, I think you should also justify, and I think more so, the sovereignty of people on their own bodies. It gets tricky. Like it gets
So,
tricky with the mask situation. Like I personally believe that you should wear a mask, but I think it gets tricky if like some people will claim, well, that's what they're doing with the masks, which is, I don't know. I want to get into that debate, but um, even those people who are it's the irony of like someone calling about yelling at the government that they don't want someone to have sovereignty over their body, and then turning around and yelling at them for the government telling them that they need to, put on masks. So I don't know.
I can't even discuss masks anymore. It's just I'm just too tired by the whole subject.
You and a lot of people you and a lot of people. Yeah.
But my logic tells me that when I say people behaved better in certain aspects a couple of decades ago, they
Hmm.
probably were also there were probably many undertones that are clear to a lot of people that caused the amount of anger that exists today.
Hmm.
It's caused people to be expressing that in all of these not healthy and new ways, the new ones being internet based.
Yeah. I think the double-edged sword of the internet, and I'm by no means an expert, so I think that expecting full breadth of being able to be limitless truly in the initial days of the internet, and still to a great degree, like being limitless in your power of searching, streaming, doing whatever, like communicating, right? I think what it's also done is it's given everybody the ability to pontificate their ideas. we've we know that that can be really a challenging thing to mediate. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, especially when someone has been told this place is free, like obviously within reason. There's a lot of illegal stuff you can do on on the internet. So
As
it's
long
the
as you
Wild
do it,
West.
as long as you do it properly.
Right, exactly. So I just think
But with
that
that said, a lot of people thought they were doing certain things that would remain free, and
right,
now they're not
right.
okay, and somebody is looking for them.
Yep, yep. But it's also, yeah. I mean, so like everybody's got a voice. Everybody's especially now locked up, angry, upset. There's a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of vitriol out there. There's a lot of good stuff too happening, like us doing this conversation. Utilizing it as a tool for good. Everybody working remotely. There's good coming out of it, but some of the ugly stuff is pretty ugly. And
Yeah, where I live is sweet, and I don't mean like that in a bragging sort of way, but like because I
it
can
is
work remotely and all that stuff. Like I've
right.
got a really neat view right now, and it's a nice day outside in the fall. You've got a
Mhm.
nice storm. I miss
Right.
I miss occasional storms, but they'll
You
be here
do.
in a couple months. Yeah, the rain. I miss that
Interesting.
occasionally. I lived in Florida though, and Florida, some years it rained. It seemed like as many days as it didn't. They'd be short bursts, but the humidity build prior to it got annoying.
I
And
can't
so
fuck with Florida, bro.
I
Like,
prefer the Mediterranean climate that
tell
I
me
have.
about it. It's ideal.
Yeah, it's in your blood too.
it's deep in my blood. It is ideal, man. It's ideal. It's ideal. I can't say anything else about it. Like, just being able to walk out. Like my old man's in Greece right now. I talked to him, and I was like, "How's the weather?" He's like, "I haven't put on a long sleeve shirt yet." He's like, "Just at night." It's like 70s during the day, maybe even like might hit a 80, and then it goes down to like the 50s, 60s. It's gonna get cold there. It gets cold. We have this like cold, like damp cold down in the villages that like eats through everything. And so you'll feel cold. Like it'll feel colder sometimes in Chicago because it's dry cold here and you're wearing your parka or whatever. But if you live in a country where you never have to use a parka and then all of a sudden it hits you with that cold, you're like, fuck. So that's why they have these like great big fireplaces that people cook on inside the house, which is like one of my favorite things. They like build like this big hearth, and then some of my cousins have ones where they'll literally just grill in their house. It's nice enough to be outside with the jacket, but it's too cold to be outside. So it's like this weird kind of in between. It's dope.
I love it.
We're just talking shit here, man.
I love it. We've been having 80 degrees during the day and 60 degrees during the evenings right now.
Amazing.
That's about my favorite time of year. When I lost everything, I had moved out here to chase one of my dreams, pursue one of my passions. And I lost everything, and I left for a little while, and I had come back. And the hardest part about that for anyone is having whatever it is that you're accustomed to go bye-bye, and accepting that so that you can move on and replace the time that you were spending with or doing whatever you were accustomed to with whatever you need to do to get back to where you would like to be. And
yeah, I know all about that.
It's a tightrope.
Yeah, it is, man. Especially when something, you know, we're having physical shit happening outside, right? Like when it's happening to you too. And you know, granted, my injury is not super uh, intense by any sort of stretch of the imagination. My foot doesn't work.
How did your foot go about not working? How did that happen?
Well, played rugby, rode, did jujitsu. Turns out I got a very narrow spinal canal. But yeah, I herniated a disc and it crushed the nerve in my leg. And it's getting better still, but it's not anywhere near 100%. I have drop foot.
And before that happened, you were pretty active. And how old?
I guess actually, you know, to be honest, the last year I wasn't that active. So I'm 36. But I think what I did not do.
Well, you were in pain the last year.
Well, right? I think the thing that I didn't do was actually listen to your advice. If I'm being 100% candid, and I will tell anybody the exact same thing you told me, which I wish I listened to, is that, like, you know, professional fighters get like 4 or 5 surgeries a year. Like, you can fix something, but you don't have to wait for it to break. And I waited for it to break, and it's broken, and it sucks. But it's taught me a lot. Like, I just started working out again. Like, the pain is nowhere near as bad as it was. It's actually forced me to do way more mobility than I ever have, do a bunch of stuff. I don't want to be a bitch. Like, I don't want to lose to this, you know?
Before this happened, was doing some sort of sport a big part of your identity?
Yeah, man, jiu-jitsu is huge. Huge. Jiu-jitsu took
weren't you an athlete in college before jiu-jitsu too?
Yeah, I was a rower, and then I played semi-pro rugby. I was never really good at any of these things. I was good enough, but not a star. Not great at a lot of things, and actually not even that dedicated of a, you know, this is where, like, fucks me up sometimes. And I wasn't even as dedicated as I could have been to them, and I still had some natural talent, sure, but I mean, I wasn't, you know, great. But jiu-jitsu for me was like the girl that got away, it feels like sometimes, because I was just starting to really explore like who I was and how it made me feel. Like, I got my purple belt. Did that even mean anything?
Yeah.
You know?
So if you don't do jujitsu, when you get a purple belt, you're usually not. Sorry, for those of you who don't know, usually when you earn a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, you're a pretty tough person. Like, you definitely more than just a regular guy on the street could handle. That means that you can handle a lot of people who do jiu-jitsu, and you're starting to enter the realm of where the black belts exist.
And also, it was like a relationship. It was a time commitment. It was time spent doing a thing that would make me cry in the shower sometimes because I was so bad at it. Like I was used to, in some small way, being able to exert my dominance physically on people. Like playing rugby, you get decent at tackling, sure, you get decent at bouncing off people. It's a physical sport, and I thought I knew what was up, and I did not know what was up, and I started figuring out I'm not nearly as tough or strong or slick or intimidating that I thought I was. And it was a great lesson, a humbling one. And that's what got me into jujitsu because the second it became really hard, it was like there's like a puzzle, right? With when I discover new sports. Like with rowing, it was about making the fucking boat move fast and crushing your time on the erg and like going to a dark place psychologically and always like having to get back there, right? It was that challenge. But it faded for me. I then rugby was about like conquering my fear. When I got to jiu-jitsu, it was just me. It wasn't relying on other people to carry the load. I've only played team sports. It's just me versus some dude who might be like 165 pounds and would catch me in something and I was like, show me how to do that. Then the puzzle of the moves and the ethos and like what it means. And our school, I know that there's like really traditional schools for those who don't listen, like that would mean like bowing and doing all that stuff. There's other very like traditional in some senses, but very non-traditional in other ways. It's just gone. It's created a whole identity of people that's very
Subculture,
different.
right?
It's a
Yep.
subculture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good. So I I just
And there's an overlapping subculture of fighters because
yeah.
jiu-jitsu is an important part of martial arts and fighting.
It just what it made me realize, quite honestly, is that I still have a lot to learn and a really big path to carve to my acceptance of myself, but also of like humility and realizing that um like I'm nowhere near as tough. Like I can be tougher. You know, I could do more. And
So,
jujitsu kind of teaches me that, I guess sometimes.
so what you're saying is jiu-jitsu was doing a lot for you, and
Yeah.
you had just entered into the realm of where the black belts swim, and you were expecting to have a like that's going to be the second half
Yep.
or the second chapter of your jiu-jitsu life,
Yeah.
your martial arts life,
Yeah. I got to the precipice.
and then it actually just disappeared.
Hmm. Yeah. Not only did it disappear, but I think it prepared me psychologically for putting myself in the
Just
headspace.
brutalized you.
Yeah, I mean, like I still haven't. It's been a year, over a year. My leg still doesn't work, but like, it also taught me. Had I not gotten to that point with jujitsu, I don't think I could have handled what happened during the recovery and like the last year as well as apart from
So
like
you got
you
so you
know
got an injury basically, and you progressively lost your leg, and then you had surgery, and
yeah, I couldn't
then
walk.
when they fixed the huge problem, part of the consequence of healing was that the nerves had to learn how to be normal again, but they were fucked up, and
Yeah,
so they don't have 100% chance of learning how to work again, and they're not doing a very good job. Is that what you're
no,
saying?
yeah,
Okay, so it's been a couple of year ordeal.
yeah. So and it's probably going to be a couple more. And then if it gets back to where it is, I will, if I do it right, and this is the big if I continue to take care of myself, which has been an oscillating thing for me, realistically. But how I'm connecting jujitsu in my mind to it is that like, even if you got your ass kicked, even if you sucked all the time, if you got to that point where you're on the precipice of like entering that later stage of that journey, you understood that like it takes years and it takes commitment to this. So you have to apply that to the rest of your life. You have to apply that to injuries. You have to apply that to relationships.
It
Um,
it also takes your body.
yeah, it takes your body. It definitely does. It does. I mean, there's a lot of people who are really fucked up. I just got the luck of the draw that it shut my leg off. I mean, there's dudes who've had multiple back surgeries doing jujitsu. Uh, you know, yeah. I mean, it brings up a lot of other questions like what is health? You know, was
Well,
jujitsu such a big part of my identity, you know?
let's come back to the what is health, but before that, you you said that if it weren't for getting to where you got in that, you wouldn't have you wouldn't have had the tools to get through this recovery process.
No, I wouldn't have had a lot of tools, honestly. Yeah, I think, and even then, it's about accountability, right? I think that one of the things that jiu-jitsu really teaches you, and it shows you by getting belts. And again, the belts aren't, they're not an indicator of anything. You know, they're, what they are is they're just a milestone, right?
I think
So
they're an indicator,
you do. Yeah. I mean, they are
but
when you start
but
getting to
I
black
I
and
get
brown
I
belt,
get what
you
you I
know,
get what you mean.
there's
I
just
get what
always
you
going to be
mean.
somebody else, you know,
For
there's
like for your journey, it doesn't matter at all.
exactly.
It just
Yes.
happens to matter within like the IBJJF World Championship.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, I mean, look,
I'm
it's
half kidding, but for the individual,
right.
it's not. They just happen to be there as a, what did you just call them?
Milestone.
As a
Yeah.
milestone of, okay, I've kind of reached. I've, this happens as part of my journey. And it's
Because
supposed
of
to
your
happen in
commitment.
this order.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of your commitment. So it is just a manifestation. It's a visual manifestation of commitment, you know, and so is like cauliflower ears. So is the shape that you get in. You know what I mean? Like these, th- there is something to be said about like, and again, I'm not tough, okay, but there's something to be said about going into that meat grinder over and over again with a bunch of other people, like watching people start like little gummy white belts and then see them taping their fingers up, and like a couple of them are like getting real slick, and you've made a progression that you appreciate. You don't know what's to follow, but like there is this kind of legacy of commitment that you see happening all around you, and it only motivates me, at least, or it would motivate me. So I don't have that north star anymore. Plus I have a lot of fear about re-injuring myself, but I said to myself, is this how, like, is this how you're going to go out? I got to
That is
figure
not.
out the I got to figure out the answer to that question.
You're still answering it.
I think I'm starting to find the answer. I hope, you know, because there's a lot of people out there right now, dude. Like, I think people are sad, they're depressed, or you know, a lot of things, and we might. I know people have died from COVID. We might die from COVID. So like, the real question is, it's like, what the fuck am like? What am I waiting for? Like, if I want to achieve whatever it is that I want to achieve, if there is, if it matters, right? First, you got to figure out if it matters enough to you, and then you can pick that whatever matters the most to you. Sorry about that. I'll wait.
Nothing like a siren going by on a rainy night and you're hearing those
Oh
tires.
yeah, yeah. That's
Nice deep chill down
it
your.
is. It is. It's very fall in Chicago. That like sound. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I saying? I don't remember. Whatever. I just think that uh, self-loathing is a really powerful tool for motivation, and I have it in spades.
It really can be like you
But
can
it also
either,
is really dangerous.
if it's still there, like you
Yeah.
probably want to try and get rid of it, but for a lot of people they can't get rid of all of it,
Yeah.
and you might as well use it rather
Yeah.
than lose
It's
it.
a useless emotion when you're in the dark part of it, and it is a fucking rocket fuel under your ass when you're like, let's get it. I know like I'm gonna feel sorry for myself, or I know that I have these tendencies, but you know what? Let's let's acknowledge them and let's look beyond them, and like then it becomes motivating, right? It's this weird tightrope walk with self-loathing. It's a really interesting thing. But anyway, it's just something that I don't want to live in the negative, in the dark side of. I want it to be a motivator.
Address,
Yeah, be like, hey,
overcome.
you know what you need to fucking do? Stop not doing it.
One of my greatest motivators is talking to myself aspirationally. like self-talk, not actually like yelling, but aspirationally speaking to myself in a kind of like a stern, but like not angry way.
You're lucky.
Like
mine is only anger.
Yeah, like I get to, but like I try to talk to myself as if I was an older brother that I thought was the coolest person in the world.
I'll tell you what, dude, that is the healthiest kind of way to speak to yourself, in my opinion. I can't do it.
Well, it's been helpful because I've needed an older brother a lot.
Yeah.
And I've needed somebody to blindly tell me that a situation that there was no way it was going to be okay. It was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have wanted to get up and go out swinging. But luckily, I've continued to be okay.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is something happens. I think if you have friends, right? Like friends have to be real and they have to be supportive. Like if you, I think a real true indicator that you're not in a good place in your life is when you have bad friends. That's like if you think people are your friends and there's a lot of drama and there are a lot of problems and they're quote unquote toxic people. I think when that saying of cut toxic people out of your life, what that really is saying is that you're taking a look in the mirror and you're evaluating your decisions, right? So I've been blessed, and I think that it needs to happen more. These kinds of conversations need to happen more. I have these conversations with you on the phone. I really like my goal in life is to foster these kinds of conversations and relationships with my friends, and to be quite honest, with strangers. Growing up in a diner allowed me to learn the skill to be able to speak to anybody. Yes, there is the benefit of being behind the counter. It's like having a bartender, but
it's an exchange though, right?
It's an exchange. When you realize that everyone's got something to tell and like a small gesture or a phone call, or even telling, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I really like to say I love you, especially to my dude friends, because they freak the fuck out, most of them, because they don't know how to say it back. But if you and what you do is you jar them and you be like, yo, no, like when I say I love you, like I mean it. I don't say it to everybody. Like I love you because you are like one of those people that I've made selective choices of keeping around. And you do the same to me, and you build this bond by words and actions. Like it has to be both. So I only say that like
actions go far.
They do. Even if it's a text message, that's an action. Even if it's a phone call, like fuck a text message, a phone call. If you call someone, be like, yo, I was thinking about you today. How are you doing? That's it. If someone pops in your mind, call them up. Dude, I'm telling you, if more people did that, just practice that. No matter how uncomfortable it makes you feel, no matter whatever. Because people are going to be like, why are you calling me? I'll be like, well, I thought about you.
Oh, really? Writing is really, really convenient, but it takes longer. You can't convey as much information as quickly as you can as speaking.
It's cold. I mean, we're getting used to it because of emojis, which is really so funny because it's just anthropomorphizing and seeing facial reactions and interpreting that in a digital world, which is very weird to me because you could look at somebody or listen to their voice and understand so much more of emotion than you get out of an emoji. But it's an interesting kind of evolutionary step in communication, I will say. But yeah, I don't know. I went on a diatribe there. I just think that, especially now, people are really thinking about their relationships and what's important and what's not important. So, tell someone you love them if you feel that way.
When I have struggled the most, I have struggled with myself. And I have chosen to spend time struggling with myself rather than reaching out for friends. And it doesn't mean reaching out for friends to help me, but reaching out to fill my life with that abundance. And instead, I replaced that time with the self-loathing, as an example. And that fosters a self-perpetuating cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helpful. But filling your life with good friends, I think, creates exchanges that promote well-being. Especially,
community. It's a tribe. It's whatever you want to call it.
You know, I have an interesting career, and I am lucky to work with friends all of the time. And not every friend can work together.
Mm-hmm.
But it pays to be able to have friends that you can work with.
Yeah, or facilitate,
or facilitate things happening, and some people look at that as networking. But what I look at that is how I'm choosing to do good things with my time. And I just want to be spending time with friends no matter what. But I want to be working. I want to be creating business. Mm-hmm. And so the world that I create, I still want to be spending time with my friends. So I want to work with my friend. I want mm-hmm. to create with my friend. I want to, involve my friends in like deals, mm-hmm. right? Instead of involving people that I know nothing about and doing that deal with, unless they become a repeat partner or consumer. Otherwise, the fostering of that relationship and getting that information is like really fruitless outside of that money. It doesn't build on anything. Whereas if you continue to have experiences on a professional level with friends, like that deepens your understanding of that person and how they work and how they act under pressure and their character. The same as training with your friends, mm-hmm. training martial arts, training for fights. Depending on your friends to take care of you and get you ready mm-hmm. to put it on the line.
I think the thing about friendship and work is that it really depends on intention. And I think that you bring up an interesting point. Maybe there should be some sort of a startup that facilitates money between friends, but only for one project ever. Like, I've seen relationships fall because of bad business decisions. And
too much commitment and dependence.
Exactly. And I think that it is a given. People make the assumption that if you work with family, it's safe. And I would tell you or anybody else that when you work with your friend, your relationship is as safe as a good lawyer's, because all you need is just to draft up a contract, and then you revisit it and you say, okay, we hit our KPIs this year, we didn't, we hit our goals, was anything weird, was anything ever, and renegotiate another contract and do it in a way that is so sterile that it maintains your friendship and work together. And you can be lucky and work together and build something wonderful and still be friends. But even within those kinds of relationships, there's levels. So,
well, you've explained it well in the past to me, the concept of I want to collaborate with my friends. Mm-hmm. I want to do projects with them, but I want like my own business. I want my project to be my project.
Yep.
I want their project to be their project. Mm-hmm. I don't want it to be intertwined.
No, the whole thing intertwined is not safe. It can be parts of it. And a great way would be obviously investing, right? Like a great way would be, for example, somebody who has a proven track record with your friend, and you say, dude, I trust you. Here's money. Make me more. They don't oversee your every move. You don't have to update them on why, as long as you can try, or at least say, you know what? I can make you X amount of money this year, but this year doesn't look that good. for XYZ reasons. Here's my recommendations. I won't take it personally if you decide to take your money elsewhere, whatever. But, like transparency. Like when I work with friends as a realtor, I tell them, like, you find somebody who does it full time if you think it's going to be better. Like, I obviously want to help you. I'm going to do my absolute best to help you. Do I make money off of it? Sure. It's not what it's about, right? I have the luxury of being able to say that. But like if you treat certain transactions like that that are finite, I think sometimes it is better than a perpetual.
Well, you raise another interesting subject that I dealt with and I didn't like, especially early on in my professional life. When I became a chiropractor, especially in the beginning, I really needed patients.
Yeah.
And I also had been indoctrinated with this thought that people were almost being irresponsible if they weren't getting certain types of wellness care, like chiropractic, which is not correct. And so I subconsciously know I put pressure on relationships, like wanting them to, I would talk about chiropractic for no reason or way more than was necessary. I just would want people to be like, oh, that's good. And if they didn't want it, then I felt like they were rejecting me. And I see that as something that people need to be careful with in professions like real estate as well, where if you are an agent or a salesperson, you need to be totally cool when somebody chooses to not go with you.
Yeah, you have to.
Otherwise, like you're creating this tension around people wanting to just live their lives.
I mean, I experienced it recently.
To have.
Yeah, it's not fun. You're right. It's not a fun dynamic to have. I experienced it recently where I was just like, why does this motherfucker not call me, to like help me get him X unit or whatever. Then I was like, so what? Like, bro, you're not a full-time real estate agent. Sometimes people don't think about you as that in that capacity. Get over it. So it's also like you have to kind of measure out. I think having witnessed a personal kind of situation that I don't really want to get too into, but just to see family members like really fuck the relationship up so much that they completely jeopardize the business, right? Like after seeing that, especially when you saw it like in its heyday when it was really operating well, you also know when to have to pull the plug. If you start feeling weird about like what's going on with your friend, confrontation is good. And not in like the aggressive sense, not waiting for something to get built up too much. Or even if it does, say, look, let's say Patrick, I'm really fucking pissed off about this. That's when you test a relationship. That's when you learn about compromise. That's when people have to back their opinion. That's when you have to make the conscious agreement to say, I'm going to say yes, accepting that this was your decision and therefore the outcome. Not, I'm going to say yes, but if it fucks up, it's your ass. It's a big difference in thinking about that. And even if it happens and you both at least say, yeah, we fucked up. Like the person who's being the Monday morning quarterback, A, needs to chill out because they said yes, right? And B, needs to offer some sort of support and look at it and be like, why didn't it work? Instead of saying it didn't work and you're a fucking idiot. Like if you learn from your failures, if you allow the other partner to take responsibility, like there are 3 rules, I think. Learn from your failures, allow other people to have responsibility, right? And keep it nice.
I have created 2 different dynamics at different times in my life. And the toxic dynamic was where I would work with friends out of necessity.
Yeah.
Because they were able to provide me with an opportunity and I was needing an opportunity.
It's tough.
The other side of that is when I'm able to work with friends out of abundance. Like, I have this thing going on. Can you do this for me?
Yeah.
Or, hey, like, this would be a good opportunity for you. You should think about doing this.
Right.
Or, hey, I can put this together for you, or hey, I was doing this, I can email this over to my friends, I know that'll be helpful to them with so and so. And when it's out of abundance, and my friends happen to be able to essentially give me things business related, able to fill holes with what we're doing, not become what the other person's doing. I feel like it's created a much healthier dynamic, and my favorite. As far as how I can potentially spend my day, I like this. It's pleasurable for me to be able to spend my day with people I'm comfortable with.
Well, here's the other thing too. If you do that, and let's say you facilitate a really good result in whatever project you have with your friend, you have to, first of all, people think, oh yeah, I'll do my friend, like I'll work with my friend, it's going to be like easy, do a favor. No, you're going to treat your friend like your client if you're working for them to do something. And if you're working in tandem, you're going to treat that thing with the utmost kind of attention, right? That's what it deserves. Even if you have a full-time job, you can set the precedent and say, look, I have a priority. You understand that, right? So these are the hours I'm available. Whatever you want to bill me, bill me. Let's talk about that. This is what's normal. And then if you do a great job, what ends up happening inevitably is your friends are going to recommend you to other people that they know, because your friends aren't just your friends alone. They know other people, whether or not it's an acquaintance or not.
Right.
If it's genuine, then what it does also, and again, this is the thing about responsibility, it holds your feet to the fire to make sure you fucking deliver because your friend vouched for you now. There's that thing with like, the mob. When someone vouches for you, like it's a real deal. So if people want to continue to be successful working with or through connections of their friends, they got to deliver. And then if you feel like you've done your best and you have your integrity of what you're delivering, and you've checked with the client to check with your friend or whatever it is, there shouldn't be any problems. And if there are, you know what you did. Like, you got to be honest. Did you work hard? Did you not? Did you fuck it up? You got to be honest. I don't know. It's easier said than done. I realize that because people have been trying to work together since time immemorial. I mean, look at our country.
Right.
Like what am I talking about? So I don't know. I guess I sometimes like this is like what I tried my motto to be, and so maybe it doesn't apply to other people.
Well, working remotely, we're all getting this different view of all of our peers all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And we're forced to be a little more aspirational.
Yeah.
Because we can either try to embody the image that we want to portray, or we can be completely fake. And we all know that that's stressful because there are plenty of wellness memes telling us that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think like the veneer, more so now in this period of time where everyone's working from home, has been, interestingly enough, through like the digital lens. Like, you're looking like right now you got your background on, but I've become accustomed to seeing things in my coworkers' houses, which is crazy. So like you have a glimpse through a portal into their bedroom, second bedroom.
Right.
You hear their kid. You do this. What that is weirdly akin to, like, in my opinion, is like living in a village where everybody knows everybody's business.
Yeah, it's almost more intimate than going to the sterile office.
Yep, exactly. And so I think some teams, like I'm very lucky, the team I work with.
You're aware that everyone's wearing pajamas.
Yep.
Right? Like, unless it's a serious thing, no one's hiding anymore behind the clothes.
Dude, I showed up like this today to a client meeting. Maybe I shouldn't have, but it was like a quick one. And the person, I dress up a little bit for client meetings, but like in general, it's about the work at some point, which is also really interesting. It's not like it's about like, okay, are we delivering? Are we agreeing? These are the ideas we have. Yes, look presentable, but like also, this is it. We all know what the deal is. Corona's happening. We're all at home. So there is leverage being given. There is leniency being given to this if the work is happening. I don't know. This has just been my experience.
I feel like that's something that a lot of us have been hip to for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that I've learned from MMA.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best guys I know at MMA don't dress how anybody wants them to dress. They don't show up anywhere. They don't feel like showing up. They don't put on outfits. They do their own thing. And when it's time to show up,
You
they
sure?
they show up and they do the
Yeah.
work, and that's who I want having my back, and that's who I want teaching me what to do with that. I
Hmm.
don't care what they do
Hmm.
or what they're wearing. I just want what they have.
Yeah.
And in times of true utility where people are doing jobs that matter and we're trimming some of the fat, I think that a lot of the little dress up stuff has faded because people are all of a sudden looking at something else.
Hmm. Yeah.
Along with COVID, I think it was still coming, COVID
One
or
way or
not.
another. Yeah, it was coming. I have to say, COVID is probably one of the better things that has happened to at least my family. Like
How
from a,
weird is that, right?
it's very weird. I mean, in the sense that I can say that because right now everyone's alive and healthy.
Right.
So, with the big caveat on that, I realize that's not the case for a lot of people. That being said, I think that when everybody, it's like when you go to the ocean or when you go out into nature and your ears buzz because there's no sounds. There are these weird moments right now where I think everyone has that like aha perspective moment because every day the news is bad. Everyone's, and also you notice people are taking advantage of the cities in ways that I never thought. Like Chicago seems like a European city now. Like people are walking everywhere. People are sitting on their stoops. People are talking. They're outside. They're
Right.
gonna be outside in the middle of the fucking winter, which is crazy to me. They probably will be.
Are they
I mean,
just going to buy those heated lamp
that's
devices?
what all the restaurants are doing. Like we have a big Weber grill in the back, and I was like,
That'll be psychedelic.
yeah, I'm gonna grill during the middle of the winter. I'm gonna go outside because I'm gonna go out on walks in the winter time in Chicago on walks. I really enjoy doing that. We'll see how it goes with my leg. I'll probably have to use a cane. But like my point is like people are going on walks all the time. People are adopting dogs. People are having kids. People are getting married and realizing they don't need to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. They can have a party in a couple of years when it's safe. Like I don't know. It's crazy. It's an interesting change. I
When
hope we
I
have more human contact, more human interaction.
when I had surgery on my left shoulder in 2014, maybe 2013, it was in the late fall, and I had my arm mobilized for months, and I really couldn't do a whole lot with it for 6 months. And I managed the chiropractic office where I worked for Dr. Baker, your friend. And I was so stir crazy that I would walk the 3.7 miles purposely through the snow instead of parts that were paved to get there to try and get energy out. And I walked through many a snowstorm, and that probably wasn't the healthiest, most normal, like mentally habit
It's not a
that
bad
I've
one
had,
though.
but it was an experience, and I have some memories from that, not of the arm, but the walking took me out of that and made me just have normal experiences,
Yeah.
like being in the middle of a blizzard and feeling like a little kid, like, oh my gosh, as I trudged through, the feet of snow in my boots, and jumping inside of a coffee shop and getting a muffin and an espresso and then
Right.
blasting back out there. Those were one of a kind experiences.
We want to move. Like we want to be challenged. That's why it's really interesting that this is like a major challenge, but for some reason like the people don't like all they're focusing on is politics instead of the real challenge, which is like let's get out of this thing. Like let's do it. It's tough because it's not killing everyone, just like the snow doesn't kill everyone. But if you lived in a community where there's a lot of snow and people would be taken by the snow, you'd be scared of the fucking snow. I feel like we don't or you'd respect the snow. I don't feel like we respect what's going on because there's just too much noise.
Well, not all of us have lost our leg.
That's true. Yeah. That's
So
true.
we're like, well, I can walk anytime. I'm going to yell at everyone right now, and I'll walk later. And they don't realize that they might not be able to walk the next day.
I think that's why being like going out to nature is like something that I want more of, and I think it's I think a lot of people are feeling that way, and I think living in cities is not, and I'm not pro suburbs. I'm
That's a
just pro.
different deal too, right?
It is a
That's a
different deal
whole
because
other. That's a
you
whole
do
other
get
deal.
it, you do
Strip
get it,
malls
but
and
yeah, it's different. I mean, like
Olive
when
Garden.
right when you go out into like the rolling hills, when you go out to even places like wine country or whatever, and I know a lot of
Yeah,
people don't have access to it.
one country is nice,
Going out to your yard and planting a garden, I don't know. Uh,
right?
there's
Which
something about
not. I'm not going to say not enough people do, but not enough people who would enjoy it too.
mhm. Yeah,
You don't need a lot of space to have an annual harvest of a lot of food,
it's true.
and that solves so many of the world's problems. Everyone has this free space right there that could just be, you know, cycling nitrogen each and every year and being functional.
Yeah.
But people are learning about that now. They're spending a little more time at home, and they think
I mean, they're making bread,
maybe
they're
I've
making
got
bread,
time. They're making
they're
bread. They're
planning.
they're
Yeah.
considering moving. They're I know that very quickly after leaving Chicago, my body forgot what that city life was like. And now I forget that a lot of people, like someone might come visit from New York and they haven't, say I'm hiking up in the mountains along a river and I just take my shoes off and jump in this river, which is crystal clear and incredible, more clean than any water you're going to get most other places,
Right.
even pool water. And the person visiting might be like, I can't believe you did that. I would never jump in water in nature,
Yeah.
which I figure, well, aren't most people doing that on the weekends everywhere? Like if you're in New York, aren't you just driving upstate and go? But
Some people do that. A lot of people do.
many people are not doing any of that.
No.
And it's easy to forget that when you do get to have that in your life. And it's positive, really positive to get moving.
Right.
I know my friends, if they listen to this, who are like the guys I live around currently, they'll probably laugh at me for saying that because they're all like sportsmen and super
Yeah.
active and so used to being outdoors and hunting and fishing and understanding how everything works and farming. And to me, and I talk about it like it's this like crazy concept.
Well, you also live in a place that's this really interesting. It's really why I like Stockton and Lodi and even Antioch. It's like where the city meets, like it's not suburban. It is towns, but it also is connected by the BART. It's also connected kind of to San Francisco. So it's like a city, but within a
Smaller.
rural setting. And it is the rural setting that like adds this flavor. Plus, you've got the only other Delta in fucking North America in Stockton, so like you have that access in California weather to like an estuary, freshwater, saltwater, mountains. Like you're in a unique place. I think that's why like Northern California is different, just from my limited experience.
I have friends who have decided they wanted to be immersed in the mountains out here, even though they didn't grow up with it, and they have created lifestyles where they could be up there climbing and mountain biking and fishing all of the time. And the more people I know who just do what they want, the more regular it seems to me. And I believe that the more regular things seem to you, the more possible they become for you.
Yeah, I think it's
I think it's
also
a part of a mental trick.
it is a mental trick, and I think the other thing is, like we went up to a farm this past weekend in Michigan, and all it reinforced to me was like, it's there. It's a stone's throw away. Like you need to take advantage of that stuff. And I would always get my fix of the outdoors, especially when I would go visit Greece, because it's like very easy because it's just like California. There's mountains. There's fucking walking
You just
all
get
over.
in your car and just
Yeah,
cruise. Yeah.
exactly. You go to some beach where no one's at, and you jump into the Mediterranean, and you're chill. And you bring food, and you're always outside because the weather. But it's also feasible in other places. Is what I'm just trying to say.